thank you so much for joining us today. We have with us Caroline Carpenter, who is the author of The Guide to the Hunger Games, which is an aptly named unofficial guide or companion to the Hunger Games trilogy. It's available right now at Amazon.com and probably in a few other places. And so thank you again, Caroline, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So to start out, we would love to know a little bit more about your background. I read that this is your first published book. So what is sort of your writing background?
Yeah, this is my first book. I graduated nearly 2 years ago, and I studied creative writing at university. And since then, I've done a bit of interning in publishing. And that's kind of how this book came about, because I started reading The Hunger Games when I was at Plexus Publishing, who published the book in the end, and we kind of collaborated together to create the book. And before that, I've just written sort of fiction, some short stories and poems.
And what exactly inspired you to write the guide? When you were reading The Hunger Games, were you thinking the whole time, I have to write a book about this? Or did you finish reading the series and then think, I definitely have a lot to say about this?
Well, while I was reading them, I was also looking at fan sites, and I just was looking into things myself as well, researching things I was curious about. And I realised that there was a lot of background information that sort of related to the books. And I thought it was really interesting. And also I saw all the photos and drawings and stories that people had created themselves. And I realised that a lot of fans were engaging with the books sort of outside of the books themselves. So I knew that there would be people who would want to engage with them and maybe would be interested in the context of the books and by having another way to engage with the books.
There are quite a few unofficial guides and companions to the Hunger Games floating around out there now. What set yours apart?
Yeah, I haven't read all of them. I've only had to look at a couple, but the ones that I did look at were quite sort of academic and factual. So I think even though my one does have information in it, and I hope it will be quite educational to readers, it's also quite fun and engaging, and there's lots of activities in there, and it covers the whole series from books 1 to 3 and goes quite in depth into different aspects of the books. So it's an overall guide to the whole world of the Hunger Games. So hopefully that will set it apart.
Yeah, I actually, those are all aspects of your guide that I personally really like. I love that it covers all 3 books, and I love that you have made it super engaging and interactive. There are, if you don't own the book yet, listeners, you should definitely buy it soon. There are little quizzes that you can take. There are codes that you can try to crack. There's a lot of fun stuff like that in it. And I also think your guide is very approachable. I think that, even middle school students who are reading the books would enjoy your guide and find it interesting and easy to digest. A lot of the other guides out there, like you said, are very academic. So I think that yours is really, I don't know, I think it meshes well with the target audience for the series. So as we just mentioned, your guide does cover all 3 of the books. Which book in the series was your favorite and why?
Well, first of all, I have to say I do like all of the books in their own way. I think I found the 3rd one quite hard in some ways because it was really sad and also really fast paced, and a lot happened and there were a lot of new characters. So I'd have to say one of the first 2. I do really like the first book. I think it's really well paced, and obviously I think Suzanne Collins sets up the world brilliantly, but I really like the aspect of the Quarter Crow in Catching Fire, and I think that the characters that she brings in of the former tributes are brilliant characters. Finnick and Joanna are some of my favourite characters, so I think Catching Fire.
Yay, that's my favorite too. And Adam, your favorite is the first one, right?
Right. The first one.
And why do you prefer the first one? Is it because, like Caroline just mentioned, the world building there is really great, and its pacing is amazing? Are those some of the reasons why you prefer the first one?
I think also it's just a case of it's the first introduction to this world. So, in addition to just building, I think the suspense level was the highest in the Hunger Games for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think when more is left to your imagination, the less you know, the first you encounter in something becomes all the more fascinating. That's why, like, for instance, my favorite Lord of the Rings movie is Fellowship. Because it was the first time I got to see all of these characters, sets, sites, the Shire, etc. on screen. So, but that being said, I was talking to some people about this, and I actually think that upon rereading the books, maybe this time, now that I know so much more about Panem, that I might actually prefer Catching Fire or Mockingjay. So I throw that out there. That's not
So your guide, and we mentioned this a little bit, it is incredibly comprehensive. It covers all three of the books. You draw in a lot of history to make parallels between historical events and the Hunger Games. There are character analyses. There are sections on the mutations and pretty much everything. Which section for you was the most fun to research?
I think, well, the first chapter that I actually wrote comes really late in the book, and that was the guide to surviving the Hunger Games. And I really enjoyed that because I was a bit, I sort of put a bit of a twist on it, tried to make it quite funny and draw in aspects of the books. So that was quite fun, and from that I sort of found a tone that I knew I wanted to keep throughout the rest of the book, and it was actually that chapter was what I first showed to the publishers, and it helped convince them that I was going in the right direction with the book. So that was really fun, and I also really enjoyed writing the pieces which were introducing the reader to areas of Panem. Writing in character, that was quite fun.
Yeah.
And doing the little fact boxes, that was quite interesting as well, to make your comparisons between the books and history and like the wide context of things.
Yeah, I love the little fact boxes. Here is an example of a fact box. This one is about the cornucopia, and it says cornucopia derives from a Latin word meaning horn of plenty. And obviously we know now that that is what the Panem national anthem is called. It's Horn of Plenty. Cornucopia, it describes a large horn-shaped container filled with food or goods, a classical symbol of nourishment and abundance. It is still used in Western art today and is associated with the American holiday of Thanksgiving. And I like that you included that fact box, because I think for Americans, we all know what a cornucopia is because it is a traditional symbol of Thanksgiving. But for, international readers of the Hunger Games who don't celebrate American Thanksgiving, they might really not know what a cornucopia is. So I like that you included that in there. And yeah, there are so many, huh?
Oh, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, yeah, and I do love all of the sort of parallels you draw between the Hunger Games and things throughout history, like the Olympics, for example. So there's a rich abundance of information. There's a cornucopia of information.
You know what's interesting too about the Olympics? When they show that video in the movie, their propaganda film, there at the reaping, it looked very Olympic to me.
It did.
Like I was watching NBC or I guess you don't get maybe BBC in England or one of those. But NBC is the network that carries the Olympics always in the U.S. And it looked like one of their promo videos that they put on before some big events.
It really did. Now that you mention it, that's a little creepy.
Yeah. Well, when I was researching the book, there were some things that I started looking into, and I just felt so silly that I didn't notice it while I was reading the book. And when you actually think about it, I just thought, oh, it's so obvious now that I've thought about it, the link between the Olympics and the opening ceremony and things like that. So I just thought when I was writing the book that I tried to write about things that interested me and hoped that other readers would interest them as well and make them look at the series in a slightly different way.
Yeah, absolutely.